Hey everyone, Dave here, and today I'm going to show you how to make White Lily buttermilk biscuits. And I'm going to tell you about 3 things you can do to make this easy. Hint, I already gave you the first one. Use White Lily brand self-rising flour. Alright, let's bake. Oh man, I forgot to preheat the oven again. Okay, for this one, I wanted to keep things as easy as possible, and that's why we're using self-rising flour. Every Southern baker I've talked to says the same thing. Use White Lily brand flour. It's the best, and that's why it's tip number 1. Since we're using the self-rising version, we don't need to add any extra steps for baking powder in the recipe. The flour already has it mixed in. Let's go over the ingredients. 300 grams of flour, 150 grams of buttermilk, 15 grams of sugar or honey if that's what you're using, 4 grams of salt, and 100 grams of butter. Alright, let me grab my bowl and we can start mixing the dough. First things first. Making biscuits goes so fast that we want to start preheating the oven to 450 degrees before we do anything else. That means the oven will be ready by the time you're done getting the biscuits ready for baking. Next, we're going to add the flour, sugar, and salt to the bowl, and then we dry mix them together. That'll make it easier to have a uniform distribution of all the dry ingredients in the dough. Okay. Get the butter from the fridge and use a knife or a pastry cutter to cut the butter into the dough and get the pieces to about the size of peas and scattered throughout the dough. Tip number 2. To help get those flaky layers everyone is always talking about, keep the butter as cold as possible and try not to use your hands to break it up or cut into the dough. The heat from your hands will start melting the butter, and that's where the pastry cutter comes in handy. Alright, now that the butter has been cut into the dough, it is time to add the buttermilk. Once the buttermilk is added, use a spatula to start mixing the dough together into a shaggy mess that is starting to hold itself together. Once the dough has come together, put some flour on the counter and put the dough on the counter. Try to quickly shape the dough into a square, but use the rolling pin to flatten it out once the shape is close enough. Tip 2.5. The rolling pin does more than just get the dough flat quickly and easily. It helps keep your hands off the dough, which means your hands are not warming up the butter yet. Alright, get the dough flattened to about 1/2 inch, then cut it into 3 rectangular strips. Stack the strips on top of each other and use the rolling pin to flatten the dough down to about 1/2 inch thickness again. This is an easy way to create layers without using your hands to fold the dough over itself repeatedly and warming up the butter. Once it's flattened, we'll move on to the next step and make the biscuits. Okay, before we cut the biscuits, grab a baking sheet and line it with parchment paper, or just use the sheet as is if you like. You can also use a cast iron skillet or whatever flat surface you have that you can bake with. Once that's done, use a biscuit cutter to shape the biscuits. All you need to do is press straight down through the dough to cut out the biscuit. Tip number 3. If you don't have a biscuit cutter, you can use a drinking glass as a cutter in order to get that round shape. Or just place the flattened dough as is on the baking sheet, and you can use a knife to cut square biscuits after baking them. A lot of bakeries do biscuits that way anyway. Now, cut out as many biscuits as you can before running out of dough. Bonus tip. Place the biscuits next to each other on the sheet, literally touching each other. By doing this, particularly if you go thicker than 1/2 inch, the biscuits will all help each other rise straight up instead of tilting or leaning, which can happen if the dough is not 100% flat. I've made some tasty but awkwardly shaped biscuits before I learned about that trick. Alright, once you run out of space to cut the biscuits in the dough, just push what's left back into shape real quick, flatten again, and cut more biscuits until you run out of dough completely. At a 1/2 inch thickness, I usually get around 9 biscuits using my large 2-inch diameter biscuit cutter. Before we wrap this one up with some delicious biscuits, please hit the like and subscribe buttons. That'll really help me out and let me know that you like what I'm doing. Also, hit the bell and you'll get notified when I post new videos. Alright, Once the biscuits are ready and the oven has been preheated, just put them in and bake at 450 degrees for about 10 to 15 minutes, depending on your desired golden brown color. If you want, you can brush some melted butter on top of the biscuits right before baking. I didn't do that this time since I'm going to eat them with extra butter anyway, but brushing with butter can add a nice sheen on top when baking. Once they are ready, take them out and eat with some honey, jam, more butter, or whatever you like. That's it for this one. Thanks for watching, and post some comments below and let me know how your biscuits turned out. Enjoy!